All right, today I want to talk a little bit about tippet. What is it? What do you do with it? Why does it have X's? Why is it named 5X or 1X? How does that relate to your leader, etc.? When I started fly fishing, I didn't have anybody teach me anything. I've learned what I could watching YouTube, reading books, and I did not grasp the concept of how to use tippet. The idea is when you have a leader, here I got a leader here. This is a 9-foot 5X leader. And I understood that 5X meant it was a certain amount of pounds, and we'll get into that a little later. But what would happen is I would tie a fly onto this leader, tie it onto my fly line, and then I'd fish, maybe break the fly off, maybe want to change flies. And that when I do that, I'd just put a new fly on. My leader would get shorter, go from, 9 feet to 8.5 or 8 feet, and etc., until my leader was unusable and also hard to turn over and hard to cast. And those were things I didn't know at the time. So I had all these problems, and it was basically because I wasn't using leaders and tippet properly. So let's talk quick about why they call or how they classify tippet. 1x, 2x, 5x, 4x. Those are diameters. Why it's not any simpler, I can't answer for you. But 5x is 0.006, 4x is 0.007 inches, 3x is 0.008 inches, and so on. So it's fairly small. That's a measure of diameter of the actual line. And because it's a measure of diameter, you'll have a tiny little bit of variation in between manufacturers. I got a chart I pulled off of Orvis's website, and it says 5X is about 4 3/4 pounds. And here's some tippet from Orvis that says 4.4 pounds. That's even within the same company. So you do get some variation between Orvis, Rio, Scientific Anglers. The actual poundage will be a little different. Not much. Diameter should be very similar, if not the same. But the poundage can be a little different. That's really neither here nor there, but you'll notice that if you buy tippet from different people. Speaking of buying tippet, everybody, every major reputable company, Orvis, Scientific Anglers, Rio, which I don't have any sitting around, pretty good stuff. You can't really go wrong. I think the more you experiment and the more you try different types of tippet, find what you like. I like Scientific Anglers for the price. I think it performs great for the price. And one thing I really like is these 100-meter guide spools. Tippet usually comes, almost all companies, standard tippet comes in 30-meter spools. That's a 30-meter spool. That's a 30-meter spool. This is a 100-meter spool. And so you can run with that spool for a long, long time. And I love that. We'll talk a little bit about how this relates to your leader. What was I doing wrong when I started fishing? So this is a typical, it's a 9-foot 5X leader. So this leader starts out thick on one end and tapers to 5X on the other. I'm not going to unravel it because it's just going to make a mess and I'll never get it back in the packaging. But this is a White River Fly Company, or White River Fly Shop, which is the Bass Pro Shop brand. So this is a cheap leader. It doesn't have a loop tied in it. You get into slightly more expensive leaders. Like here's a Rio saltwater leader. That's a, if it matters, a 10-foot, 16-pound leader. And here's another point. You get into beefier stuff, saltwater stuff, they're not going to use the X system. They'll just give it poundage. And again, that depends on the company. So it makes it more confusing still. But most leaders from Rio, from Scientific Anglers, from Orvis, are going to have a loop. So you're going to take that loop on your fly line, join them like that. If you don't have a loop on your fly line, you can tie one on there. Tie a perfection loop. Look it up. Animatedknots.com is a great resource. Check that out. Just Google perfection loop. You can tie yourself a loop, or you can use a nail knot. And a nail knot, not terribly difficult to tie. There are tools out there that can help you tie it better. But most modern fly lines are going to come with a loop. Sometimes loops go bad. You use a fly line for a long time. You might have to cut your loop off, tie a new one, or use a nail knot. Now, back to that 5X leader. So what happens is you break off a fly. Say you want to make your leader a little bit longer. Say the fish are very spooky. You take your 5X leader, which starts thick and tapers down to 5X, and you're going to tie, let's say, a piece of 5X on the end of that. So you're just lengthening that leader. It's going to help. Well, the point of the taper in a leader is to turn the fly over. That's what that taper does. And that's why you have to maintain a certain ratio of material, thicker at the back, thinner at the front, to get that good turnover. Also helps, if your casting starts getting poor, you can't figure out why. Sometimes looking at your leader is a good place to start. So let's say you're breaking off flies and you've got a foot or two off your leader, so it's time to put some more tippet on it. And you can do that with a double surgeon's knot. You can do that with blood knots. There are a number of ways to do that. Again, animatedknots.com. If you haven't seen that website and you fish, you're screwing up. Check that out. That's like really, really good resource. And the idea is tippet extends your leader. And that's how you don't run through 5 leaders every fishing trip. And you can tailor make something for your fishing situation. So if you're fishing really spooky fish and you're getting refusals on 5X, or really, really clear water, you need to go to 6X, which is a little thinner. Maybe 7X. I'd feel bad for you if you did. 7X is minuscule stuff. But that's what tippet is for. You can add to your leader. You can custom tailor the end of your leader for whatever fishing situation you happen to be in. And that's why it's so important to have a little bit of variation. And you can actually make your own leaders. Again, the importance there is a taper. So you start with a thick butt. The leader has a thick butt end, which tapers to something slightly thinner, and thinner. And then finally at the terminal end, where you're going to attach your fly, you're going to go with the diameter that you want to fish with. So if you need to use 5X, you need to start something thick and then taper down to 5X gradually. And the amount of taper really depends on what you're doing and how you want it to turn over. And that's kind of an advanced thing to learn, tying your own leader from scratch. But let's say you're just fishing for largemouth bass. Take a piece of 20-pound, monofilament and put some 10-pound after it. You just made a tapered leader. It's a very simple concept, but there's a lot to it. There are 2 general kinds of tippet: monofilament or nylon and fluorocarbon. Most tippets you see, most things people buy are monofilament. If you're going to fish dry flies, you need monofilament because it floats. Fluorocarbon does not. If you're going to fish nymphs, you don't need fluorocarbon, but it can be helpful. It refracts less light underwater, so it looks clearer. It's also more abrasion resistant, so you might need that if you're going to fish streamers and rocks, or you're fishing something, a big game species that can abrade line. If you're tarpon fishing, you may want to use a fluorocarbon bite guard, things like that. One other reason you would want to look at a different size of tippet is the action of your fly. Now this typically affects things like nymphs way more than anything else. Dry flies to a degree, but nymphs are one area where if you're going to use something like 2X, which is relatively thick when it comes to trout fishing, that's 0.009 inches or 9.8 pounds give or take depending on the manufacturer. If you're going to fish nymphs on that, their movement is going to be very restricted in the water. Whereas if you step down to 5X, which is, just for reference, 0.006, or Orvis says 4.4 pounds, somewhere around there, it's going to give those nymphs more freedom of movement on the line, which you may very well want when you're fishing nymphs. Same with dry flies, to a lesser degree, I think, personally. You certainly don't want to fish, tiny little trichos on 1X, but definitely with nymphs, you want to be careful, or at least cognizant of how your tippet affects your fly. Now, I think that goes with most flies, but your fishing streamers, it's not going to have much of an effect, things like that. But definitely nymphs and dry flies. And I think that's about it. Thanks for tuning in.